And I think marketing gets a really hard rap because, of course, everyone thinks they can do it. If it comes off, it'll be brilliant. And if it doesn't, then it was still a great idea.
One piece of advice you'd give to like a new restaurateur starting up?
Oh, well, first thing you should do is...
Oh, that's even bigger now.
We've got a potential thing with a footballer coming up, which is... he's not in this country, but I think he's coming to the Premier League next season.
Fabrizio over here, like, here we go. Is she good crack?
Like, she's excellent crack. Something that I've learned relatively recently over the last few years, and that I've instilled to people within my team as well, is...
Welcome to this Flip Dish Takeaways podcast. I'm joined by Vikki O'Neill, Global Marketing Director for Vapiano. Vikki, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This might be the fourth or fifth time we've tried this now. Few different takes. But yeah, I want to get a little bit of background on you and how did you get into hospitality? Take us back to the start of your journey.
Okay, the start was the year 1999. So way before the millennium bug was the biggest fear of our year.
Y2K.
Y2K. And I joined Wagamama. So, relatively fresh out of college. I'd been in publishing before and I got a job in the office at Wagga. There were 3 restaurants. So, of course, we had no idea it would become the absolute monster of a noodle brand that it became. And I worked my way up from the 3 restaurants. We opened probably another 65 during my time there, international as well as in the UK. And head of marketing at Wagamama. So it was a brilliant 6 years.
Amazing. And what was the first role you went in as? Did you go in straight into marketing or were you doing a couple of things? Or
there wasn't massive amounts of marketing being done. This was way before digital. There wasn't a website at this point. There was a really wonderful woman who was doing some kind of marketing PR stuff mainly at that point. And then she left and I picked up a couple of the bits and then we opened in Manchester. And being from Manchester, everyone looked at me and went, right, how do we launch in your city then? So that was kind of how it really started from the year 2000.
Wow, amazing. And then what was the kind of development then from there to growing it to was there any big changes that helped you guys get from, 3 stores to where it is now?
Well, it was a really unique brand of and I think everyone kind of recognised that. It was, one of the first with the sharing tables. The food came out as soon as it was made. Once you got over the what the hell, for a lot of first timers, it was absolutely embraced, and not just in London where things like that can easily be accepted, but out of London as well. It was just really loved, and I think that franchise partners looked at it and was like, this is a really incredible brand. I want to be a part of this. And that's when it opened. It was already in Dublin when I joined, which is a brilliant restaurant. And we then took it to the Netherlands, Australia, America, in Boston, Copenhagen. I think that was it at the time.
And did it thrive in all those locations, or was there any ones that did better than others, or was one market more ready for Wagamama than maybe others?
Yes and no. I think it depends a lot on the franchise partner that we had. The Netherlands was really successful. We had a number of restaurants there. Ireland was really good at that point. Boston was relatively new for us. I was leaving kind of 6 months after Boston opened. So I wasn't part of that kind of whole growth experience. But, Australia ended up closing, but that was more of a franchise issue than a popularity issue because it was doing incredibly well.
Yeah, it's one of the few restaurants that I can remember. I think the first time I ate in Wagamama was maybe 2008, so I would have been about 18. And it this is the first restaurant that you couldn't book a table for, but everyone was willing to queue to get in. And it was such an unusual idea of it's just off Grafton Street and you're just standing, waiting to go down into 2 floors into a basement, not really sure what's down there. But I was like, well, if the queue is here, it's got to be worth going down for. And I just remember thinking this is highly unique. And then there's all these rumours that Irish rugby players eat there. So if you want to see Brian O'Driscoll, go to Wagamama on a Saturday at 3 p.m. when the moon is at, and you're like, that's where you'll see him. So yeah, it was a really interesting brand to see that. So you obviously capitalised on that whole vibe.
It was brilliant. And that whole basement thing, like you mentioned, was such a key strategy from the founder Alan Yao. Is he wanted basement sites, which I assume back in those days would be also cheaper to rent than ground level. But all of the early day sites, apart from Wigmore Street by Selfridges, were basement. And that was part of the appeal. You were going somewhere underground, a little bit cool. You know, people saw the queue and joined it without even knowing what they were joining the queue for, but they wanted to be a part of something. So, yeah, really cool days.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it before, but it was a girlfriend at the time who was like, a little bit older than me. She was like a cool indie kid who was like, this is where and I felt like I was in there with people that I probably shouldn't be sitting around, but I was like, yeah, I can be cool in Wagamama as well.
You were cool, don't worry about it.
I definitely wasn't. I was on her coattails, but yeah, it was a great place. So then from Wagamama, where did the next step of your career take you?
So while I was at Wagamama, I was asked to join Giraffe by the founders, and they were a very completely different brand. You know, it was a family-owned, very small. They had 9 sites, I think, at this point. And it was about, obviously, global food from around the world. They were well-travelled. They knew what good food was. And, their first, which was in Hampstead, in the village, was incredibly popular. Excellent coffee and just really good food. And they asked me to join them a couple of times. And then I said yes, and I joined them in the start of 2007. And it was an incredible 4 years. I learned a lot. They had some good investors behind them who I got to know, and I was there for 4 years, and that was an incredible journey. So we went from 9 to 45 during my time.
Wow.
There, and a lot of airport work. You'll see Giraffe or kind of variations of the brand Sonoma now in Gatwick and Heathrow, and they're still incredibly successful brands. And the standards, one of the things that one of the brilliant guys who worked there, Andrew Kemsley, is kind of like a trainer, director, would instill in that the sugar pot should always have the sugar standing up at a certain way, and the sugar pot should always be full. You'd never have 2 or 3 sugar sachets, the long ones in the pot. They always had to be. And even now, when you go in at the airport, it's exactly the same.
Of that,
and it's like,
standards.
That's just absolute standard. It's such a basic, but they get it right every single time.
Incredible. And what was the major challenges of growing from that? Was it 9 to 45? Was there anything that really kind of, from a marketing point of view, that was challenging about that?
Not that I remember at the time. It was a really well-received brand, and it was loved by all because it was a very family-friendly restaurant. So obviously moving from Wagamama, which obviously was family-friendly, children would come in, and over the years, people that were there in their teens would then go on to have children and still come into the restaurant. But Giraffe was specifically very focused on family. They were a family-owned business. It was hugely important to them that translated into the guest experience, which I think we did really well. But equally, it wasn't off-putting. If you and I went for a couple of cocktails and a beer, and food, we wouldn't have been put off by the fact that there was a few kids or families in there. It was never chaotic. It was always relatively calm, but just managed really well.
And then Vapiano was the next step in that, and
yes and no. So I left Giraffe in September 2011, and it was on the advice of Luke Johnson, who was one of the major shareholders in Giraffe at the time, had said to me, what are you going to do next? And I said, I'm going to go and work for Nando's, or I really like that kind of mid-market, fast casual restaurant, because that's where all my experience was. And he said, no, you should go freelance. You should consult, because what you do in terms of social media. So Giraffe were the first on Twitter. We were pioneering social media. We won awards for it back in 2008 and 2009 when social media was like the big thing.
Yep.
So he said, you will consult. And I was like, no, I'm too scared. And he said, just do it. And, but luckily that week I'd had a call from someone I knew at Sticks and Sushi who said that, look, we're opening in London next year. Will you help us launch? Now you've gone solo. And I was like, absolutely. Client 1 done. And then I got a couple of other clients, Patisserie Valerie. This was, before the financial impropriety. And I picked up Tortilla, Pizza Union, and Vapiano were a year later. And I was working with them 1 day a week, and that became 2 days, became 3 days. And then over the years, I kind of dropped a certain number of other clients and focused quite mainly on Vapiano. And then I worked for free in lockdown because the restaurants were closed. I was a consultant, there was no money to be had. And cooking pasta in my kitchen and taking it to influencers. So, keep the voice alive, during lockdown when everyone was online. We kind of our socials just blew up, millions and millions of impressions compared to, a quarter of that for normal stats. And then the company was kind of had a management shift and change, and they said to me, would you be the global marketing director? And I was like, thank you very much. Yes, I will. And that was that. So that's been just almost 4.5 years now.
Amazing. And when we go back to the consulting part, when you were thinking about obviously taking on clients, what sort of time frame would you look at? Would it always be 6 months? Was there an optimum time for you to come in, do what you think you needed to do, or was that completely ad hoc or dependent on the restaurant?
It was dependent on the restaurant, but for the majority of them, I was like a restaurant wife. I was there long term. This wasn't like a flash affair and, come in and do whatever and then piss off again. I was there for, with Pizza Union, I was there from the start for 5-6 years. Sticks and Sushi, 6 years. Vapiano obviously was a long time. Tortilla I was with for 5 years or so. So there was a lot because I was kind of like a, flew-in marketing director that would support either an existing team that was there. I'd be able to mentor people within their team. So they kind of, at that age, just as I was, you don't know what you don't know. And I was able to kind of build up and help a lot of the, mainly women in those teams to kind of think bigger and do more and help the MD, CEO, whatever it was on a more strategic kind of brand level as well.
Amazing. And you mentioned there about, I think you were saying about around 2009 where social media was a really big thing. Are you kind of alluding to the fact that it doesn't have the same influence now, or where do you see it playing a role? Obviously, Twitter or X or whatever you call it now has changed drastically. Like, how do you see that kind of that landscape shifting?
It's got even probably more resonance now than it had back then. But back then it was really new. And I remember sitting in a board meeting with the founders, my bosses in Giraffe and Luke Johnson saying, look, there's this thing called Twitter and you write something in 140 characters and they're like, the fuck are you on about? What is this? Just do it if you want to do it, So we created this account, Giraffe Tweet, and, we would talk about everything from football to the weather and we built such an incredible community that, we had so much fun with it. And it really brought, I think, marketing teams closer to the guests than anything ever had before. And it was massively unique. And at that point, Instagram wasn't around, you had to jump 3 more years or whatever for Instagram to come out. But now everything's digital. It's probably the biggest revolution, tech, in restaurants that, I think restaurants are as much a digital brand as they are a physical place, for sure.
And do you see that now as maybe a way of utilising social media, that it's not just about promoting your dishes or your restaurant? It's actually, people want more than that. They want to know, what you thought about the football or a comment on that or the weather or whatever it is. So it doesn't just feel like I'm just being advertised to the entire time, that you're building maybe a personality online. Is that something you'd recommend? I
think on the whole, yes. I think Twitter was particularly good at that because it was purely written, conversational. It was less about the image, less about the video. It was purely words, and how you communicate, and also who you would respond to. You would see tweets from someone having a bad day, you'd be able to jump in and go, oh, what's happened? Come and have a drink tonight. I'll buy you the first one or whatever. Yeah. And that would bring a different kind of relationship building to customers that nobody had really had on that level, personal level. We knew when people were having a bad day. We knew when they'd had a baby. We knew when they just got married. You kind of know all of that through Twitter. Now, I think the whole, it's very hugely visual. It's all about video, and if you put up pictures of your dish all of the time, it would be pretty boring. You have to have a sideline in your back of house, what your chef's doing, what your team doing, bring a bit of personality. There's so many different trending topics every single day that, jumping on a few of them just adds that personality. Whatever's right for your brand, not everything will be. I think that really resonates with people. They like you already. They can just like you even more when you show them some interesting stuff.
And is X or Twitter, is that still something do you use? Do you utilize it? Or, you obviously have heard with the takeover and everything that it's become a bit of a different place than it used to be. Is it something that you would even bother marketing on now, or?
Vapiano still do, because we built from 2012 onwards, we built a really super solid community of people, real champions of ours. And, people would discover us that way. They would be able to talk to us. They would never, do a public complaint. It would always be a DM because they felt very protective of a brand. We still are active on it because our guests are still active on it. Less so. The numbers are not the same as they were, but they're still significantly higher in terms of impressions and engagement than any of the other platforms.
Okay.
And we're high on those as well. So it just shows you the level of, we've kind of built this village, we built a community, we'll embrace it up until a point they don't, and then we'll be able to be like, okay. But we acknowledge that X is not the platform it was, for sure. Unfortunately.
Bit of a hellscape sometimes.
And I refuse to call it X. It's still being Twitter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one. Over my dead body. Talk to me about TikTok then. Is that something that you guys use? Do you have a TikTok presence? This is where I start feeling old myself, because like my sister's on TikTok. She's like 11 years younger than me, and she's like making these day in a life videos like she's a celeb or something. I'm like, she just gone to hockey practice and come home and like gone to work. I'm like, all right, people are watching this, that's fine. But is that something you guys engage with as well? And is the content different to you marketing?
It is different. I think you have to understand, not you, but the general public and, CEOs and everything, that the platforms are very different. Instagram was purely visual photography for some time. Now it's mainly video with the introduction of Reels a few years ago. TikTok is TikTok's the chaos. TikTok's the fun. TikTok's do whatever the hell you like, but or make it on brand, do something fun with it, where Instagram is slightly more curated. If people look at you, we would in the past probably Google something. If someone said go to this bar, this restaurant, we would have Googled it. Now I Instagram it. I go on Instagram and search what is it like. But I also TikTok it. What are they doing on TikTok? Where people who are a whole lot younger than me will probably just go straight to TikTok.
Yeah.
So the first impression of your brand on any of the channels, you want it to be right. You want it to be representative. You want it to be the quality of the food that you offer. You want it to be consistent, but you also want to be entertaining and informative. And why should someone want to come and see you? So
yeah, and hit the demographic that's in that world, right? Which changes a lot. Yeah. The TikTok thing I think it's amazing how all those apps, and I feel like it must be so daunting for, obviously you're in a big business, but I always think of the companies we work with, like the mom and pop stores. How do you go and start tackling social media when you need a slightly different voice, but to be brand consistent across them all? Like, any advice for someone who's going into that world to try and do that? It
is tricky if you're a solo business owner and you're doing the operations and you're in the kitchen and you're doing the marketing and whatever. But a lot of them do it successfully. You don't have to do it every single day. You're going to have priorities, but that's where your guests are. And if you're not in that presence, then all your competitors will be, and it's just one of the nature of the world we live in. But, it won't take too much time to be authentic and film whatever you're cooking, or set the camera on a stand and just talk about what you're doing that day. If you've got specials or, a drink you've got coming out, and you can show it in a very authentic way. It doesn't have to be super flash curated AI or any of that. You can do it in an informative but really cool way that works for you, and then build on that, see what works. That would be my advice. Yeah, one of the guests we had on the podcast, Teresa Borza, she's been in the restaurant industry, I think, something like 56 years. So started working there when she was like 8. Borza's chipper in Dublin, and she was telling me that, she started getting involved. Her daughter helps her with the content, but she's the star of the content. And she did a video where it's just her shoveling the chips into a bag with whatever the relevant song on TikTok was. I'm starting to sound really old even just trying to explain these things, but whatever the song was, and I think the video got 2.1 million views. Whoa. Yeah, and she's like, I think I'm famous now. Like, yes you are. Yes you are, absolutely. And it's just great and it's great to see someone who's, like she explained to me in that podcast, she's come from a place where they were using an old till where you just like keying in and printing off a little receipt and all that kind of stuff, to now she's dancing online and bringing in millions of views, and just that must be so amazing to go through that transition. So you're right. I think people need to embrace it where they can, right? Absolutely. Or find someone that you work with or within your team who wants to embrace it. If you've got a founder that isn't open to that because they feel shy or they don't get it, then there will be one other person in the team that absolutely will be begging to have a go.
Anyone under 30 basically is like, yeah. That used to be a skill I thought I had. I used to be like, oh, I can video edit. Now literally like 12-year-olds are making like complex
crazy,
like videos, doing voiceovers and all this kind of stuff, and it blows my mind. So let's kind of go back to Vapiano then. Major challenges with them. What was the kind of when obviously you were kind of you ease your way into that role to like you said, from a couple of days to then obviously the global marketing manager. Like what were your first kind of things to tackle there with Vapiano? Was there anything that you wanted to get your teeth stuck into first?
Well, it's a franchise business, which adds a different level of complexity within it, because you've got various strengths within that and very different markets. So we have our, bigger markets are Germany, where the business started, in 2002, to Austria, neighbour country is big. Netherlands is big, and Australia. So very different cultures, very different, slightly different demographics, kind of different ways of doing things, of looking at things, of thinking about things. So, a global idea or campaign would have to be make sense for the brand overall, but then how would that translate into those markets? And what I came to realize is not everything will. We can do different things with different partners. We can offer different solutions. We're here to guide, support, make sure the brand standards are maintained in terms of the visuals and the quality of the food and across all online. And to make sure that they get value. And if they're struggling for, a particular issue, they will say to me, ABC is my problem. What do you reckon? And then we will work out together how we can tackle that. And any learnings that we get from that specific challenge or idea, we can then toolkit that up and say to the markets, this was an issue, this is what we did, this is the results. If you want to try it in yours, let us know how you get on. And that works really well. It's a very collaborative, very connected business. Really tight relationships with the partners. So that's kind of how we run things.
Is there any restaurants in the space at the moment that you look at from a marketing point of view and go, they're nailing it? I love that. Like, I know I don't want you to talk up maybe a competitor, but anyone else in the space you think, wow, those are cool campaigns, or that was an interesting idea that you've kind of maybe might nick that?
Well, I think that there's a lot of brands that are doing stuff really, really well. And if you look at one that's kind of accelerated over the last 3 years, is probably Wingstop. They have a very simple product. It's very singular-minded, so it's easy for them to market what they do. They had a very similar demographic to Vapiano, relatively young, kind of major city demographic mix, which is great to see. And Nando's have a similar crowd, but they do what they do really well. They know who their guests are. They market to them, but without alienating someone like me. I order Wingstop. I think the chicken's great. Their marketing is not aimed at me. But I understand it and I can see it and I can see it working. Now, maybe that's my marketing head on. And if I wasn't a marketer, would I feel the same? I don't know. But I think they do what they do really, really well. Got a really good team there.
Cool, yeah. And those kind of singular ideas, I think, can be great. There's a particular place in Ireland that always comes to mind. Like, it's called Bunsen, which is a burger place. And their entire menu is a business card. And it just has cheeseburger, no cheeseburger, like beef burger, and then 2 types of fries, and that's it. That's all you can order. But it is absolutely amazing. Like, it is so good because they do one thing and they do it really well. And like, if you speak to an Irish person, you say, do you want to get a burger? Like, the brand comes to mind. So they've done an amazing job over the years of making that
That's
happen.
really cool.
Yeah, I think
I'm
that's
going to check them out on Instagram.
Yeah, do
I'm going to check them out on TikTok.
Yeah. Oh my God, I don't even have TikTok, so yeah, I need to get that. So what maybe are the plans for Vapiano now going forward? Like, what's the next year look like? Where are you gonna go with that?
There's a lot of development within the business this year. So, we've got a lot of things that we're looking at in terms of, our whole guest journey changed during lockdown. So historically, Vapiano was hugely loved and well known for having the chef ordering. So you'd go straight to the chef and he'd say, I want a carbonara, no bacon, add chicken, chili garlic, cheese on top, whatever. That was your dish. And you would watch it be made and you would say, go on, a little bit more parmesan or whatever to the chef. And the chef would be like, okay, I will. And it worked incredibly well, but equally it was the biggest pain point because people had to queue. And on a Friday night, it would be an hour's wait in a queue for pasta. And we had 5 or 6 stations. So we took that away in lockdown because of the government regulations. We went purely digital with QR code ordering, which, a lot of people have really loved. But, we're missing that USP part again. So we're looking at what we do with that. We've got a great brand director and business development director within the business who are, looking at all of this. So I think that'll be something we really delve into in the next 12 months. And working with our partners on some cool campaigns. We've got a potential thing with a footballer coming up, which is I had a good idea. He's a massive Vapiano fan, so I'm like, let's see if he's up for this. This challenge. No,
give us initials. Who does he play for?
He's not in this country, but I think he's coming to the Premier League next season.
Oh, that's even bigger news. Fabrizio over here, here we go. Yeah, this is now a football podcast. Excellent.
His agent's up for it, so we, we'll see. If it comes off, it'll be brilliant. And if it doesn't, then it was still a great idea.
Would this be one of your first celebrity collabs, or have you done anything else with?
We did something in France. So there's a rapper called Soul King, who most UK people would not have heard of because the music doesn't really translate really from French over to our market. But he was really big in France, and he'd done a radio interview where he was obviously saying in French, which I cannot do, that Vapiano was his favourite restaurant. So the team in France called him up and said, well, his team, and said, look, would you want to do a collaboration? And he was like, yeah, I'm doing a new video for my new track. Why don't you give me some food for me and all the team? Pay us a bit of cash and not cash, but pay us some money. And it wasn't a backhander in a brown envelope. So we paid the money, and we've got our branding in his video, and it's gone on to have something like 400 million views.
Oh wow!
This video. So Soul King, Suavemente is the track, and it's an absolute banger of a track. Honestly, I've got it on my Spotify playlist. Got a few of his tracks. So we did that with him, and that was brilliant. And then we appeared in his 3rd video as well, with our pasta and our iced tea, because he's literally obsessed with Vapiano. So, and then we did another one with a French rapper, not so much of a rapper, kind of a pop rapper, called Soprano, who's slightly older than Soul King, but he's got a big, massive following. So we did a special menu with him as well. So that was cool.
Cool. Wow. That's amazing. He sounds like maybe what Ed Sheeran did for Nando's for a while. If you remember that whole thing, it became, people were like, he's got his own Nando's card and he doesn't ever have to pay, all this kind of stuff that was coming around. Going back to the customer experience thing, it sounds like, well, at least from what I know about Wagamama's, that's obviously a very unique customer experience. You're sitting at a table with other people. You're kind of all mucking in. You're getting the food as it comes out. It sounds like Vapiano is also in that space of having that. Is that when you look at that as a marketeer and go, this is something I can really sell to people, because it's not just sit down, somebody comes over, takes your order, you pay and you leave. Does that make your life easier?
Sure. Yeah, it does, because I think people, especially younger people, and as time has gone on, and obviously Waga's still, massively popular, and it will be appealing to brand new people all of the time. I think there's a level of autonomy that Vapiano really enjoyed, because you would walk in, you would get this chip card on arrival, you would order with the chef, sit where you like. We had this thing, sit where you like, stay as long as you like. We've got massive restaurants, and we kind of wanted people to feel like it was their place, their home, and it worked incredibly well. And even though we've changed the guest journey over time, there's an element of that still really exists. But I think that kind of different way of ordering and different way of sitting and, shared tables, just sitting with strangers, is just so commonplace now that people are really cool with it. You might not want it on a Valentine's Day if you're taking, your new girlfriend out, and, you might want somewhere a bit more intimate. and that's great. But then, Valentine's week for us is absolutely massive.
Is it? Yeah.
Absolutely huge. So people like to do different things, and I think they want to be in a place that they know, they feel comfortable in, where they know the food, and then they can go on to do all sorts of whatever drinks and go somewhere else. But I think places like that are really appealing to a younger generation for sure.
Absolutely. Anything to just change it up a little bit, right? From what people expect, which is great. I wanted to ask, if you were to go back to your younger self getting into the marketing game, what would be your piece of advice that you would give yourself way back when? Whenever?
That is a really good question. I think something that I've learned relatively recently over the last few years, and that I've instilled to people within my team as well, is take it professionally, not personally. And I think that when I was younger, starting out, if somebody didn't like something or challenged it, I would be so offended, or upset by it, and couldn't quite understand, and maybe didn't articulate myself in the best way of the argument, why such a thing should happen. And it rarely happened, but on the occasions it did, I remember thinking, God, if I knew now what I knew then, I knew then what I knew now, then it would be, take it professionally, because it's about doing the right thing for work, and it's not about you, even though the stuff that you do is the work. You have to separate yourself, and I think that was really important.
It is hard to separate yourself from your ideas, though, right? Because they feel like they've come from you, or they're like maybe a representation of you, and it is like the art from the artist kind of thing, right? So
and I think marketing gets a really hard rap because, of course, everyone thinks they can do it. You've got CEOs, you've got investors, you've got, in every business, most people within that business think they know marketing and think they can do it. And for the most part, they've probably got some really brilliant ideas that you really should look at adapting, And sometimes it's not the case, and then you have to kind of balance that thing. But marketing, more than any other department, gets that rougher ride, I think.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go to the dreaded question now of AI. What are your thoughts? How do you feel like it's going to impact marketing? Is it great for the industry? Is it going to kill jobs? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we have to embrace it because it's not going away, for sure. I think it will kill other jobs like police. We'll all have robot police in 20 years, I'm sure, who can run faster and have facial recognition than all of us. It's terrifying. But when it comes to marketing, I think that it's really got benefits. I think it will help you clarify an idea. If you've got a thought or an idea or a campaign or creative, AI can really help you thrash it out. How could it work? How could it work globally? It can be a really good sounding board, which is really bizarre because it's obviously just a computer, but some of the things it brings out are genuinely useful and helpful. I think, from most businesses around, they're probably using it to write their emails and stuff like that. I think you can see sometimes that maybe that's the case. But you know what? You put the content in. If it can write it 20% better, perfect. Why not? It can only help you and help your business. So, I'm not afraid of it. Certainly from a marketing point of view, I don't think it will replace people because you still need someone to, do the work and do the communication between operations and printers and guests and email. But it can probably help, at this point for the most part, as a benefit for sure.
I find it's great for getting something started. So like it might not do it the way you want it to do, but I always find it's easier to correct something else than start it yourself. If you were looking at a blank sheet of paper and you need to put like a proposal together or a marketing campaign, I'd prefer, you might, maybe in the past it would have been the intern that would write up something and then you go through and go, stupid idea, like scratching through it. But eventually you'd end up with something really good. I feel like AI can just get the ball rolling now and then, so it can either finish off the idea, but I think you're right, that human element either in the middle is required to make it make it good and real.
Yeah. It's not going to kill us yet.
No, it's not going to full Terminator on us. So tell me, death row meal, what are you having? This is something I ask every guest.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I would probably not go to one particular, I would go to one. I'd go to Hawksmoor because I love the team. I've been going there for forever. It's been the place I had my longest 7-hour lunch. We almost stayed for dinner. It was that long, but we were too drunk.
escorted off the
So
premises?
I would go to Hawksmoor venue because, you know, the steak is great and the wine is excellent. The wine choice is excellent. But I would also have a lobster roll from Quality Wines shipped in to delay my inevitable death. I would have that shipped in. And
From where?
From Quality Wines.
But as in, we're shipped from what country, or?
Oh no, just shipped from the restaurant.
Oh, from the restaurant.
From
Okay,
Farringdon.
so it's here.
So I'm in Covent Garden in the basement in Seven Dials, Hawksmoor, but a courier is bringing me a lobster roll from Quality Wines.
So you're sitting to the electric chair. They're going
to
serving it up. Love that. So anyone else in the industry, because we're obviously always looking for guests for the podcast. Anyone you've met within the industry that you feel like had a really big impact on you and you think would be a really good guest for us to get on the pod?
Well, it's a bit biased because I know her, but one woman who I think is really revolutionising data within the industry is Victoria Searle. So she set up a business called Data Hawks about a couple of months before lockdown. And basically what they do is they join your data dots, you know, within your business, and it really helps you give strategy to your communications, your email. It can look at your entire data set within a business and translate what that means in terms of volume and value, monetary, to your business. And her business has evolved, you know, loads over the 5 years. Incredibly smart, incredibly well connected. Lots of businesses are working with her. You know, she's looking at, you know, America and the Middle East now with other clients, but it's such a unique part of this business, you know, hospitality, that we are only just probably in the last 5 years starting to really look at data and how as marketers we use data to drive strategy and make fundamental decisions. You know, so much of marketing is emotion and assumption and whatever. And, you know, she can bring that emotion into the data by just making sure your communications are targeted and personalised, you know, to the nth degree. And it's massively unique. And she's been around in the industry a long time. And I think she'd be an excellent guest.
I'm going to ask a very Irish question now. Is she good crack?
She's excellent crack.
Amazing.
Okay.
Because all of that sounded fantastic, but I was like, will she be good crack as well?
Yeah. Oh, yes. You would have more of a laugh with her than you would with me.
Stop now. I don't know about that. Amazing. So, maybe just kind of, if you want to kind of, before we finish up, tell us like where we should go to find Vapiano, what like, how do people engage with the brand? Like, what are the socials? What's the website? Where do we go for that?
Okay, so I'll promote the UK one because it doesn't make sense to promote the Spanish or French or Austrian Vapiano at this point. So Vapiano UK is the social for TikTok, Instagram, and the website vapiano.co.uk. We have a new website launching in 10 days, 2 weeks, so don't look at it yet.
So you're busy with that.
And we've got 5 restaurants in the UK, 1 in Manchester, 4 in London. Oxford Circus was the first, and we're Tottenham Court Road, Tower Bridge, Paddington, and Manchester City Centre.
And my final question for you is one piece of advice you'd give to like a new restaurateur starting up. What do they need to do as their first point of call in marketing to get them off the ground?
Oh, well, first thing you should do is just register it on Google Business, because people won't be able to find you and the information won't be right, and that will drive a lot of traffic your way if your basics are met. That's like a fundamental basic. And obviously just claim all your social handles so nobody else can claim them for you, then try and charge you for getting them back.
Yeah. Didn't someone do that with 21st Century Fox or something?
There's been a few instances. I wish I'd have thought of it.
How they didn't think to buy. You bought it for like $5 and then sold it to them for millions. I love it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Vikki, for coming on. I really appreciate it, especially second time round as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.
Yeah, you too. Let's go for a beer. Yeah.